Hey there, get comfortable, dim the lights if you can, and let's slip back about 1900 years to a place where the Roman Empire runs out of road. Picture a river, wide slow, the color of pewter in the fading light. This is the Rhine, and on a summer evening in the 2nd century, it's doing what it's done for thousands of years, just rolling along, not caring much about empires or borders or the tired men standing guard on its banks. On one side of that river sits Rome. Not the city itself, of course, Rome, the idea. Stretched thin all the way out here to what feels like the edge of the map. On the other side sits Germania, and by Germania we don't mean a place with a name and a government and a capital city. We mean forest, a lot of forest. Dark, thick, endless-looking forest that the Romans never quite managed to conquer, no matter how many times they tried. And they did try, more than once. It never really stuck. So this river became the line. Not really a wall, more like an agreement nobody signed. The Romans call it the limes, and no, that's not the fruit. It's pronounced more like limes, and it just means border or boundary. Along this limes, every so often, you get a fort. Small, practical, a little worn down from weather and time, but sturdy. Built from timber and turf, with a ditch dug out front and a wooden palisade running along the top of an earthbank, like a fence with a serious attitude. Ours tonight sits right on the riverbank, where the land is just high enough to give a good view both ways. If you were a bird flying over it at dusk, here's what you'd see. A rough rectangle of walls, corner towers poking up at each edge like the fort is politely raising its hand. Smoke drifting up from cook fires inside and beyond the walls, that tree line. Just sitting there, watching, or at least it feels that way if you stare at it too long. The sun's getting low now, painting the sky in those soft oranges and purples that always look better than they have any right to, out here in the middle of nowhere. The heat of the day is easing off. Somewhere inside the walls, someone's hammering on metal. Probably the armorer finishing up a repair before dark. A dog barks twice, and then decides it's had enough of that. Smoke curls up lazy and thin from the cook fires, carrying the smell of grain porridge and wood smoke out over the water, where it just disappears into the evening air. This fort isn't home to legionaries alone. Not always. Sometimes it's auxiliary troops, recruited from other corners of the empire, men who maybe don't even speak Latin as their first language. But whoever's posted here, they've all got one thing in common. They're a long, long way from wherever they started. Now, if you're picturing something grand, marble columns, big dramatic gates, that sort of thing, let's reset expectations a little. This is a working fort. Function over flash. The walls are wood, not stone, at least for now, because stone forts come later in a lot of these frontier posts. The gates are heavy oak banded with iron, and they get shut every night like clockwork because out here, just in case, is basically a way of life. Beyond those walls, the land drops down toward the river, and then rises up again on the far bank into the forest, and that forest just keeps going. The Romans have maps, sort of, but honestly, a lot of what's out there is guesswork stitched together from old reports and secondhand stories. Nobody's out here charting every tree. It's less known territory, and more territory we've decided to leave alone, mostly. And that's the strange thing about a frontier, isn't it? It's not a wall you could reach out and touch. It's a feeling. One side, you've got roads and bathhouses and men keeping ledgers about grain shipments. Other side, you've got, well, nobody's quite sure, and that uncertainty is doing a lot of the work here. It keeps men alert. It keeps torches lit a little longer than they probably need to be. As the light fades further, the fort starts lighting up from the inside. Little points of firelight in windows and doorways, like the place is slowly waking up, just as the world outside goes dark. Somewhere in there, among a few hundred soldiers settling in for the evening, is the man we're going to spend tonight with. He doesn't know it yet, but he's got night watch coming up, which means tonight he gets to stand right at that edge we've been talking about, Rome behind him, mystery in front of him, and just watch. Stay awake so everyone else doesn't have to. So let's go find him. Let's follow him through his evening. The food, the armor, the walk up to the tower, all of it. Nice and slow, no rush. Out here at the edge of the empire, nobody's really in a hurry anyway. Get cozy. We've got a long, quiet night ahead of us. All right, let's step through the gate. Picture those big oak doors swinging open just enough to let you slip through. And now you're standing inside the fort proper. And here's the thing about Roman forts. They're kind of obsessed with order. Like, deeply. Almost suspiciously tidy. You'd think out here on the edge of nowhere, things might get a little loose. Nope. Rome brought its paperwork brain all the way out to the frontier, and it shows. Most forts like this one are laid out in a shape that's basically a playing card. A neat rectangle with rounded corners, like someone took a ruler to the whole idea of military base and said, let's keep this civilized. Two main roads cut through it, crossing in a big plus sign right in the middle. One runs gate to gate one way, the other runs gate to gate the other way. Simple, predictable. A soldier could get transferred from a fort in Britannia to one out here on the Rhine, and basically know his way around by lunchtime, just from muscle memory. Right where those two roads cross, you've got the heart of the whole operation. The Principia, the headquarters building. Think of it as the fort's brain and filing cabinet rolled into one. This is where the standards are kept. Those sacred unit banners that soldiers would genuinely rather die than lose. Which, fun fact, happened more than once in Roman history. It's also where the paymaster does his thing, where officers plan things out, and where a small shrine sits quietly in the back, keeping an eye on unit funds and a bit of unit morale. Spiritually speaking, right about now at dusk, the Principia is mostly wrapped up for the day. A clerk or two might still be in there, finishing up a scroll by lamplight, muttering about supply numbers that don't add up. Bureaucracy, alive and well, even at the edge of the known world. Just around from headquarters, you've got the granaries, the Horea, and honestly, these might be the real MVPs of the whole fort. Raised up off the ground on little stone or wood supports so air can flow underneath and keep the grain dry and rats a little less thrilled. A fort like this needs to keep months of grain on hand because supply wagons don't exactly run on a tight schedule out here, and an army that runs out of bread is an army that gets cranky fast. So these buildings are basically insurance policies, quietly doing their job in the background while everyone else gets the glory. Wander a bit further and you hit the barracks. Long, narrow buildings, row after row. Each one split into little rooms housing 8 men apiece. Simple wooden bunks, a hearth space, gear stacked along the walls. Nothing fancy, but it's home, in the loosest possible sense of that word. And then tucked into most forts, you've got the bathhouse. Yes, bathhouse. Out here on the frontier. Hundreds of miles from anything you'd call civilization, and the Romans still found room for hot baths. Honestly, kind of impressive commitment to comfort. Steam rooms, a cold plunge, maybe a bit of exercise space. Some evenings, a few off-duty soldiers might still be in there, soaking off the day because apparently, even on the edge of the empire, self-care matters. Now as the sun keeps dipping, the whole fort starts to shift moods. Daytime is drills and marching and shouting and general busyness. Evening is slower, softer almost. Wood smoke drifts up from cook fires between the barracks, curling around in the cooling air. Somewhere, a pot of grain porridge is bubbling away, and the smell of it, kind of nutty, kind of plain, honestly not winning any awards, still manages to make your stomach growl a little, because it's dinner, and dinner is dinner. From over near the armory, you can hear steady hammering, clang, clang, clang. Some poor soul working late to fix a dented shield boss or straighten out a bent blade edge before tomorrow's watch. It's not urgent, just routine. The kind of background noise that everyone in the fort has probably stopped even noticing. The way you stop noticing traffic if you live near a busy road. Somewhere off toward the stables, a horse snorts and shifts its weight, unbothered by any of this. A couple of soldiers walk past each other on the road, trading a nod, maybe a tired joke about the officer on duty tonight. Dogs, because there's always dogs hanging around a fort somehow. Trot along, sniffing at cook fires, probably hoping someone drops something. And above it all, the sky keeps doing its slow fade from orange to a deep blue-gray, the first stars starting to poke through. The fort's torches and lamps are getting lit one by one, little warm dots appearing in doorways and along the walls, like the place is settling in for the night the same way a person might light a lamp and pull a blanket a bit tighter. It's a good kind of busy quiet, everything running the way it's supposed to, everyone knowing their job. And, somewhere in one of those barrack rooms, our legionary is finishing up his evening, about to sit down for a meal before his watch begins. Let's go join him. Let's duck into one of those barrack rooms, the one just past the second turn on the main road. This is where we meet our guy for the night. Let's call him Marcus, not because that's definitely his real name. Honestly, half the Roman army seems to be named Marcus, Gaius, or Lucius, and historians are still sorting out who's who. But Marcus works fine for tonight. He's maybe late 20s, been in the army about 6 or 7 years, originally from somewhere down in Gaul, though at this point he's spent so long marching around the empire that home is kind of a moving target. His room is small, cozy if you're feeling generous, cramped if you're being honest. This is a contubernium, a fancy word for what's basically 8 guys sharing one room and calling themselves a little family, whether they like it or not. And most of the time they do like it, because when you're marching 20 miles a day and eating the same boring porridge together every night, you either become friends or you become extremely tired enemies. Most units figure out friends is the better option. The room itself is simple. Wooden bunks along the walls, a small hearth space near the door for warmth and cooking, gear stacked up wherever it'll fit. It's not glamorous. It's the second-century equivalent of a college dorm room, if the college also occasionally required you to fight tribesmen in a forest. Marcus's bunk is the one closest to the door, which is either the best spot or the worst spot, depending who you ask. Best, because you get first crack at fresh air. Worst, because you're the one who gets nudged awake if someone stumbles in, late making a racket. Right now, though, it's quiet. Most of his tent mates are elsewhere. A couple at the bathhouse, one probably gambling away his pay on dice again, which, statistically, in the Roman army, somebody is always doing. Above his bunk, there's a little shelf, more of a ledge, really, holding his personal bits and pieces. Not much. Soldiers travel light because soldiers travel a lot, but what's there matters to him. There's a small bone comb, a bit worn down on one edge. Doesn't sound exciting, but trust me, when you're marching in full gear through mud and rain for weeks, a decent comb becomes a genuinely treasured object. Small joys out here count for a lot. Next to it, a little clay lamp, simple, round, with a small spout for the wick and a thumb-sized dish for the oil. Nothing decorative about it, just a practical little lamp that's traveled with him from posting to posting. He's had it long enough that he knows exactly how much oil it needs, exactly how it flickers when it's about to run dry. It's the kind of object you don't think about much until you realize you'd genuinely miss it if it broke. And then there's the letters. 2 of them, folded up, a little worn at the creases from being handled more times than is probably good for them. Here's the slightly funny, slightly sad part. Marcus can't actually read them all that well. Reading and writing weren't exactly guaranteed skills for a Roman recruit, especially one who grew up working land in Gaul rather than sitting in some tutor's study. He knows his letters, sort of, enough to make out a name or a simple word here and there. But a full letter from home is still a bit of a puzzle for him. So what does he do? Same thing plenty of soldiers did back then. He gets a friend to read it to him. There's a guy, 2 bunks down, Titus, who had a bit more schooling before he joined up, and Titus reads the letters out loud, slow and patient, while Marcus just listens and nods and pretends he's not getting a little emotional about it, because that would be embarrassing in front of the guys. The letters are from his mother mostly. Simple stuff. The harvest was decent this year. His sister's expecting a baby. The neighbor's goat got into the vegetable patch again and caused all sorts of drama. Nothing dramatic. Nothing history book worthy. Just home. Just the regular, boring, wonderful stuff of a life going on without him, back where he came from. He keeps the letters anyway, even the parts he can't read himself. Maybe. Especially those parts. There's something comforting about just holding a piece of paper that your mother touched, even if the words on it are still half a mystery to you. Marcus sits on the edge of his bunk for a moment, looking at that little clay lamp, its small flame steady in the evening air, drifting in through the doorway. Outside, he can hear the fort settling into its evening rhythm. Someone laughing near the cook fires, a dog trotting by, the distant clang of the armory still going. In a little while, he'll head over for the evening meal with the rest of his tent mates, and after that, gear up for his watch. But for just this one quiet moment, sitting in this small room that's held 8 tired, homesick, occasionally hilarious soldiers, for longer than any of them probably remember, he lets himself just be still. It's a small room at the edge of a big empire, but right now it's exactly where he needs to be. Let's go find the others and get some food into this man before his watch begins. All right, dinner time. Let's go find the rest of Marcus's tent mates and see what's cooking, so to speak. Now, before we get into it, let's set expectations here. If you're picturing some grand feast, roast meats and fine wine and all that, nope. Wrong empire branch entirely. That's more of a wealthy Roman senator situation. This is army food, and army food across pretty much all of human history has one main job: keep the soldier upright and marching. Flavor is a nice bonus, not a requirement. So let's talk about what's actually on the menu tonight. First up, the reliable old workhorse of Roman military rations: grain porridge, usually made from wheat, sometimes barley, boiled up into a thick, plain kind of gluey mush. It's not going to win any awards. Nobody's writing poetry about this porridge, but it's filling, it's simple to make in bulk, and honestly, after a long day of drills and marching, a warm bowl of anything starts to look pretty good. Alongside that, you've got hardtack. The Romans call it buccellatum, which is a fancy word for what is essentially a very dense, very dry biscuit. This stuff is built for one purpose: to last. It doesn't spoil easily, it travels well, and it will absolutely destroy your teeth if you try to bite into it dry. Most soldiers know better. You dunk it. In water, in wine, in that porridge, whatever's handy, just to soften the thing up enough to actually chew it without risking your dental health for the empire. And then there's the drink, pasca. This one's kind of interesting. It's water mixed with a bit of soured wine or vinegar, sometimes with a few herbs tossed in if you're lucky. Doesn't sound thrilling, I know, but here's the thing. Plain water on a long campaign isn't always safe to drink, and the acidity in the vinegar actually helps keep it a bit more drinkable and, weirdly, a bit more refreshing on a hot day. Soldiers genuinely like the stuff. It became something of a soldier's signature drink. So much so it shows up again and again in stories about army life. Basically the Roman legionaries' version of an energy drink, if energy drinks tasted mostly like regret and old wine. Rounding out tonight's meal, a bit of salted bacon, cured and preserved, sliced thin, giving the whole meal a much-needed hit of actual flavor and fat. After grain and hardtack, that little bit of salty, smoky bacon probably feels like a small miracle. So Marcus grabs his share, settles down near the hearth with his tent mates, and the room fills up with that particular kind of noise that happens whenever hungry, tired men finally get to sit down and eat. Bowls clinking, someone chewing loudly and getting mocked for it, someone else complaining that the porridge tastes exactly the same as it did yesterday, and the day before that, and, yeah, pretty much every day since he joined up. "You say that every night," someone points out. "And every night I'm right," comes the reply, mouth still full. Off to one side, a couple of the guys have already pulled out dice, rattling them in a little wooden cup, before tossing them onto a flat stone between bites. Dice games are basically a national pastime in the Roman army. Soldiers gambling away bits of pay on games of chance, night after night, in barracks all across the empire. Some nights you win a little, most nights you don't. Tonight, judging by the groan that just went up, somebody definitely didn't. Talk drifts, easy and unhurried, the way it does when a group of people have spent enough time together that conversation doesn't need much effort. Someone mentions home, a farm back in Hispania, sun-baked and dry, where his father's probably still arguing with the neighbor about a boundary wall that's been disputed for 2 generations running. Another guy from somewhere up in Italia talks about his mother's cooking, real cooking, not this stuff, and gets immediately booed by the whole table for bringing that up while they're all eating porridge. Marcus mostly listens tonight, chewing his softened hardtack, letting the conversation wash over him. Titus, the letter reader from earlier, is going on about some cousin back in Gaul who apparently just got married. And Marcus finds himself thinking about his own letters again, tucked away back on his bunk. Maybe tomorrow he'll get Titus to read through them properly, slow, so he can really sit with the news this time instead of half catching it between yawns. It's a small moment, this meal. Nothing historic about it. No battles, no emperors, no grand decisions being made. Just 8 tired soldiers far from anywhere they'd call home, eating simple food together and complaining about the porridge like it's the most important thing in the world tonight. And in a strange way, maybe it is. Because in a life full of marching and standing watch and following orders, this, the food, the dice, the easy talk, this is the part that actually feels human, the part that makes the whole thing bearable. Soon enough, though, the bowls get set aside, and it's time for Marcus to start getting ready. His watch is coming up, and there's gear to put on before he heads out into the dark. Let's go help him get dressed for the night ahead. Dinner's done, bowls are cleared away, and now Marcus has got a job to do. Time to gear up. Now this next bit is worth slowing right down for, because putting on Roman military kit isn't just throwing on some armor and heading out the door. There's a rhythm to it, a order that everyone follows, mostly because it's the order that actually works. Put things on wrong and you'll be adjusting straps in the dark later, which nobody wants. First up, the basics. A woolen tunic already on from earlier gets tucked and settled properly. Over that, if the night's cool, and out here near the river, evenings do get a bit of a bite to them. Maybe a leather subarmalis, a padded layer that goes underneath the armor. Think of it like the world's least comfortable sweater, except its whole job is to stop metal armor from chafing you raw and to soak up some of the impact if things get exciting later. Function over fashion, every time. Now the armor itself, depending on the era and the unit, Marcus might be wearing lorica segmentata. That's the banded armor you've probably seen in paintings, strips of metal plate, linked together with leather straps and buckles, wrapping around the torso and shoulders like a very stylish metal accordion. Or he might have lorica hamata instead, which is chainmail, hundreds, sometimes thousands, of tiny iron rings linked together into a shirt. Both do the same basic job, just with different levels of how annoying is this to put on by yourself. Honestly, the segmented stuff, with all its straps and buckles, kind of works better with a second pair of hands. So, Marcus and Titus, being good tent mates, help each other out. One holds a shoulder piece steady while the other does up the buckle, then they swap. It's routine by now, quick, hardly even needs talking through. A little like watching 2 people who've folded laundry together for years. Nobody needs instructions anymore. The hands just know what to do. Once the armor's settled and sitting right, And there's always a bit of shifting and adjusting, a shrug of the shoulders to get it to sit comfortable. Next comes the belt, the cingulum, if you want the proper term, hung with little metal fittings that jingle faintly with every step. Fun fact: the more decorated and jingly your belt, historically, the more it might have said about your rank or experience. Basically, the Roman version of pinning medals to your uniform, except this version also holds your dagger. Speaking of which, the dagger, or pugio, goes on one side, small, practical, the kind of thing you hope you never actually need but are extremely glad to have if you do. Then the big one, the gladius. The short sword that basically defines the whole legionary look in most people's heads. It's not some giant dramatic blade, actually pretty compact, made for close, controlled fighting rather than big wild swinging. Marcus checks the edge out of habit. More ritual than necessity at this point since he sharpened it just yesterday, and slides it into its sheath on his right hip. Next, the shield. The scutum. Big, curved, rectangular, built from layered wood and covered in leather, with a metal boss right in the center that can double as a handy way to shove someone if things get up close and personal. It's heavy, genuinely heavy, and carrying it for a whole watch is its own kind of workout. Marcus hefts it up, gets a grip on the handle behind the boss, and settles it against his side for a moment, getting used to the weight. Again, the way you'd resettle a heavy backpack before a long walk. And finally, leaning against the wall where he left it, the pilum, the throwing spear. Not needed for tonight's quiet watch duty most likely, but soldiers carry it anyway, because most likely and definitely are two very different words, and the Roman army has never been big fans of assuming. By the time Marcus is fully kitted out, he's carrying a genuinely serious amount of weight. Metal, wood, leather, all of it stacked onto one tired guy, who'd honestly rather just be sleeping right about now. But there's something almost calming about the whole process too, if you let it be. Every strap, every buckle, every piece settling into its familiar spot. It's the kind of repetitive motion that quiets the mind a little, like a soldier's version of a bedtime routine. Except instead of pajamas, it's several pounds of iron. He gives himself one last check. Shoulders, straps, sword, shield. The same little once-over he does every single time, whether he needs to or not. Titus does the same, nodding at Marcus once they're both squared away. "Ready?" Titus asks. Marcus shrugs, the movement barely noticeable under all that gear. "As I'll ever be." And with that, the two of them head for the door, boots echoing on the packed dirt path, off toward the fort's main gate, where the watch is about to change. Let's follow them out into the cooling evening air. By the time Marcus and Titus reach the main gate, the sky's gone properly dark. Just a last thin line of dusky blue, hanging low over the tree line across the river. Torches are lit along the walls now, little pools of warm light pushing back against the growing dark, and the gate itself looms up ahead, big and solid like it's daring anyone to try something. A handful of other soldiers are already gathered here, some just arriving, like Marcus and Titus, some clearly already finishing up. And you can tell the difference at a glance. The ones coming off duty look rough, mud up to the knees, cloaks damp, faces tired in that specific way that says they've spent the last few hours walking a patrol loop along the riverbank, watching nothing happen over and over in the dark. One of them, a stocky guy named Rufus, catches sight of Marcus and gives him a nod, wiping a smear of mud off his cheek that mostly just relocates the mud rather than removes it. "Anything happen out there?" Marcus asks. Rufus shrugs. "Saw a deer. Big scary one. Nearly declared war on it. Rough night. Devastating. This is pretty normal, honestly. Most nights on the frontier are boring. Genuinely, wonderfully boring. Boring is good. Boring means nobody's shooting arrows at anybody and everyone gets to go to bed later without any drama. Soldiers might grumble about the tedium, but Deep down, everyone's quietly rooting for another uneventful night. Now, before anyone actually swaps places, there's a bit of formality to get through because the Roman army loves formality about as much as it loves grain rations. This is where the tessera comes in. A small wooden tablet with the watchword written on it passed around earlier in the day so everyone on duty knows the secret word for tonight. It's basically the ancient version of a password, except instead of typing it into a phone, you're murmuring it to a slightly grumpy officer holding a torch. Tonight's watchword gets checked and confirmed between the outgoing and incoming soldiers. Quiet and quick, more habit than suspense at this point. Nobody's really expecting a disguised Germanic warrior to stroll up and awkwardly guess the wrong word, but the system exists for a reason, and Rome does love a system. Then comes the inspection. The centurion on duty tonight, a broad-shouldered, no-nonsense sort of man named Servius, who's been in the army so long he's basically fused with his own breastplate at this point, walks the line of soldiers, heading out, giving each one a once-over, checking gear, checking posture, checking that nobody's about to fall asleep, standing up before they've even started. He stops in front of Marcus for a second, eyes flicking over the armor, the shield, the sword. Straps are loose on the left, Servius says, tapping a finger against Marcus's shoulder plate. Marcus reaches up, adjusts it. Better? Marginally. Servius moves on, already inspecting the next guy, leaving Marcus to quietly retighten the strap properly, while trying not to look too embarrassed about it. It's not really harsh, this whole inspection thing. More like a very serious, very tired form of caring. Servius isn't checking gear because he enjoys nitpicking. He's checking because a loose strap at 2 a.m. on a dark riverbank is exactly the kind of small thing that turns into a bigger problem later. And he'd rather deal with it now in the torchlight where it's easy. Once everyone's checked and passed, the formal handover happens. A few words exchanged between outgoing and incoming soldiers about anything worth noting. Quiet night. Nothing past the second marker. Watch that one plank on the walkway. It's loose. Small, practical stuff. Passed along like a baton in a very slow, very muddy relay race. Rufus claps Marcus on the shoulder on his way past, heading in toward the barracks, already thinking about food and sleep and washing the mud off, probably in that order. Have fun out there, Rufus says. Try not to declare war on any deer. No promises, Marcus replies, and then, just like that, it's official. The outgoing watch peels off toward warmth and rest, and the incoming watch, Marcus, Titus, and a handful of others, turn toward the gate, toward the dark, toward the long stretch of hours ahead of them before dawn finally shows up to relieve everybody properly. The big gate creaks open just enough to let them through, guards on either side nodding them along, and then it's just them, stepping out past the safety of the walls, the fort's warm torchlight slowly falling behind, and ahead, the river bank, the watchtower, and that dark, quiet forest waiting on the other side of the water. Marcus takes a breath of the cool night air, settles his shield a little more comfortably against his side, and starts walking. Time to go stand at the edge of the empire for a few hours. The walk from the gate to the watchtower isn't long, just a few minutes along a worn dirt path that hugs the inside of the riverbank. Marcus and Titus split off from the others here. Titus heading further along to a post further down the line. Marcus veering toward the tall wooden tower waiting up ahead, silhouetted against what's left of the evening sky. See you at sunrise, Titus says, already walking backward a few steps. If the deer don't get me first, Marcus calls back. Titus laughs, then turns and heads off into the dark, boots crunching softly on the path. Now, the watchtower itself. It's not fancy, but it does its job well, built from thick timber posts, rising up maybe 30-40 feet into the air, with a small covered platform at the top, just big enough for 1 or 2 soldiers to stand, watch, and occasionally complain about the wind. A ladder runs up the inside. Sturdy, though it does creak in a way that always makes you a little nervous the first 100 times you climb it. By now, Marcus barely notices. He starts up, rung by rung, shield strapped across his back now instead of held at his side. Because climbing a ladder with a giant rectangular shield in your arms is a genuinely terrible idea that someone probably learned the hard way generations ago. The climb takes a minute or so, his boots finding each rung out of pure muscle memory, and by the time he reaches the top, he's breathing just a little heavier, the cool night air feeling good against his face after the effort. He steps out onto the platform, and this is the view that makes the climb worth it. Behind him, back the way he came, the fort sits glowing softly in the dark, torches flickering along its walls, smoke still drifting up thin and pale from a few late cook fires. From up here it looks small, almost cozy, honestly, tucked in against the riverbank like a little pocket of warm light in an otherwise huge, dark world. And then, Marcus turns forward, toward the river, toward Germania. And this is where things get properly atmospheric. The Rhine stretches out below and beyond, catching just enough moonlight to look like a long ribbon of dull silver winding its way through the dark landscape. It's quiet down there, current moving steady and slow, the same way it's moved for longer than anyone standing on this tower has been alive, and probably longer than the tower itself has existed, honestly. Beyond the river, the land rises up gently into that thick, dark tree line, the forest that the Romans never quite managed to fully map, fully tame, or fully stop being a little unsettled by, if we're being honest. From up here, it doesn't look dramatic or menacing exactly, just vast, endless almost, stretching off into darkness in every direction Marcus can see, swallowing up the horizon like it's got somewhere better to be than showing itself off to a tired Roman soldier. And here's a neat little detail. If Marcus looks carefully, off in the distance, past the first stretch of trees, there are small points of light, faint, flickering, unmistakably fires. A Germanic village, most likely, tucked away out there in the dark, going about its own version of evening. People cooking, talking, probably complaining about their own version of porridge for all Marcus knows. It's a strange thing, seeing those lights. On one hand, it's proof that the forest isn't actually empty, that there are people living their whole lives out there, just like Marcus is living his over here. On the other hand, it's a small reminder of exactly why he's standing up in this tower in the first place. Because unknown and inhabited aren't the same as friendly, and the Roman Empire, for all its roads and bathhouses, has a complicated up-and-down relationship with the tribes living across that river. Some seasons there's trade, actual trade, goods moving back and forth, tentative peace holding steady. Other seasons less so. Marcus doesn't know which kind of season this is, not with any certainty, and that's honestly part of the job. Standing here, watching, ready for whichever version of the story tonight turns out to be. But right now, at least, it's quiet. The fires across the river burn steady and small. No sign of movement, no sign of trouble. Just distant light in distant dark, same as most nights. Marcus settles in, shifting his shield off his back and leaning it against the tower's wooden railing, propping his forearms on the edge to get comfortable. This is going to be a long stretch of standing and watching, and there's no use doing it uncomfortably. Below him, the river keeps moving. Behind him, the fort keeps glowing. Ahead of him, the forest keeps its secrets, same as always. And for now, up here at the very edge of the Roman world, with nothing but dark water, dark trees, and a whole lot of quiet stretching out in front of him, Marcus settles in to do what soldiers on frontier duty have done for generations before him. He watches, he waits, and he lets the night slowly unfold around him. Now that Marcus is settled up in the tower, let's just slow right down for a while. Nothing much is happening, and that's kind of the point of this chapter. Let's just listen. The first thing you notice, once your eyes stop doing all the work, is the river. It's always there, a steady, low hush of moving water, current sliding over rocks and around the bend somewhere off to the left. It's not loud. It's more like a constant, low murmur underneath everything else, the kind of sound that fades into the background until you deliberately pay attention to it again, and then it's all you can hear for a minute. Under that, there's the wind. Not strong tonight, just a soft, occasional breath of it, moving along the riverbank, rustling through the reeds down near the water's edge, then climbing up to brush against the wooden palisade along the fort walls. And the palisade has its own little voice when the wind hits it just right. A low creak here, a soft groan there, timber shifting slightly against timber, the whole structure settling the way old wood always does, like it's stretching after a long day. Marcus barely notices any of it directly anymore. Not after this many nights up in a tower like this. But if you asked him to describe frontier duty to somebody back home, this is probably what he'd land on eventually. Not the fighting, because most nights there isn't any. But the sound. This particular blend of water and wind and creaking wood that somehow becomes the whole soundtrack of frontier life. Every so often, an owl calls out somewhere in the trees across the river. A low, hollow sound, drawn out, then quiet again for a while, before it repeats. Marcus used to jump a little at that sound, back when he first got posted out here. First few weeks, every owl call had him gripping his shield a bit tighter, positive it was some sort of signal, some secret Germanic code for attack now. Turns out, it's just owls being owls, doing what owls do, completely uninterested in the political situation between Rome and the tribes beyond the river. His own gear makes noise too, if he shifts his weight even slightly. The leather straps holding his armor together creak softly. A small familiar sound by now, almost comforting in a weird way, like the sound your own house makes, settling at night. The metal plates of his larica click gently against each other whenever he moves his shoulders, a small metallic clink that's about as dramatic as frontier night watch usually gets. Somewhere back behind him, from the fort itself, faint sounds drift up every once in a while, a muffled laugh, a door somewhere closing, the very distant clang of something metal being set down. Ordinary human sounds, small proof that the world back there is still going, still warm, still full of people who aren't currently standing very still in the dark, waiting for something that probably isn't going to happen tonight. And then, further off, past the river, past the tree line, a wolf howling somewhere deep in the forest, long and low, rising up and fading back into silence. A second one answers a moment later, further away, and then a third, briefly, before the whole forest settles back into quiet. It's the kind of sound that, on paper, should probably be terrifying, and, to be fair, the first time Marcus heard it, way back when he first arrived at this posting, it absolutely was. Nothing quite grips your attention like wolves howling somewhere out in a forest you can't see into, especially your first week on frontier duty. Standing up in a shaky wooden tower with only a shield and a general sense of, I hope this job doesn't get exciting tonight. But time does something funny to fear. It doesn't erase it exactly, but it wears it down at the edges, smooths it into something more like familiarity. These days, when Marcus hears the wolves, it barely registers as alarming anymore. If anything, it's almost reassuring, in its own odd way. The forest doing its usual forest things, wolves doing their usual wolf things, everybody minding their own business out there in the dark, same as every other night. The tension is still there, though, somewhere underneath all this familiarity. That's the honest truth about frontier duty. You get used to the sounds, you learn which ones are just nature being nature, but you never fully stop being aware that somewhere out there, past all that dark and all those trees, is a whole world Rome doesn't control, doesn't map, doesn't fully understand. And a soldier standing watch is, in a very real sense, the thin line between that unknown world and the warm, orderly one back behind the fort walls. So Marcus stands there, shield leaned against the railing, letting all these sounds wash over him. River, wind, creaking wood, distant owls, distant wolves. The occasional soft clink of his own armor, shifting as he breathes. It's not silence, exactly. It's something fuller than silence, a whole layered hum of a world going about its business in the dark, entirely indifferent to the small, tired soldier standing quietly above it all. Watching, listening, waiting for a sunrise that still feels like a long way off. He shifts his weight slightly, leather creaking softly again, and settles in for more of the same. The night stretches on, patient and unhurried, exactly the way frontier nights always do, standing watch for hours at a time, with nothing much happening. Does something interesting to the mind. It wanders, and right about now up in his tower, with the river murmuring below and the fort quiet behind him, Marcus's mind starts drifting back to where all this started. He's from Gaul originally, a little farming settlement, not big enough to really call a town, more a cluster of homes and fields near a river that, honestly, wasn't all that different from this one, if he's being fair about it. Rolling hills, decent soil, the kind of place where the biggest news of the season was usually about weather, or crops, or whichever neighbor's animals had wandered into whose vegetable patch this time. He joined up when he was about 20, not out of some grand burning desire to serve Rome, if he's honest with himself, though he'd never say that part out loud to Servius, obviously. Mostly, it was practical. Farming life back home was fine, decent enough, but it wasn't exactly overflowing with opportunity, especially for a third son who wasn't going to be inheriting much of anything. The army, on the other hand, offered steady pay, food, and, this part mattered a lot, the promise of something real waiting at the end of it. 25 years. That's the standard term of service for an auxiliary soldier like Marcus, give or take. 25 years of marching, drilling, standing watch, moving from posting to posting across whatever corner of the empire needed soldiers that particular decade. It sounds like an enormous stretch of time, and honestly, some nights standing up in a cold tower listening to owls, it feels like it. But at the end of it, there's a reward waiting, and it's not a small one. Roman citizenship. That's the big one. For an auxiliary soldier, someone recruited from a province rather than born a full Roman citizen, completing that full term of service, earns you citizenship, for yourself and often extending to your children too. And citizenship in this world opens doors, legal protections, better standing, a whole different set of opportunities than the ones available back in his little farming settlement in Gaul. On top of that, sometimes there's land, a grant, a little plot somewhere, a chance to actually settle down after 2.5 decades of moving around and build something permanent. Marcus doesn't think about this part too often, mostly because 25 years still feels like a long way off, and getting his hopes up about a quiet little farm somewhere just makes tonight's cold tower duty feel that much longer by comparison. But every so often, especially on nights like this, quiet and still, his mind wanders there anyway. He pictures it sometimes. A small house, maybe near a river, because apparently he can't imagine a life that doesn't involve a river nearby at this point. A bit of land to work, animals to tend, no more marching 20 miles a day in full gear, no more porridge that tastes exactly the same as it did yesterday and the day before that. Just quiet. Ordinary. The kind of life his mother back home is already living, the kind of life he complained about being boring, right up until he joined the army and discovered what not boring actually involves, which, turns out, mostly means occasionally terrifying, with long stretches of standing around in the cold in between. His family crosses his mind too, obviously. His mother, whose letters he still can't fully read himself, bless her handwriting, which even Titus squints at sometimes. His sister, about to have a baby, which will make Marcus an uncle to someone he probably won't meet for years yet. Given how postings work, his father, who passed a few winters back, before Marcus even had the chance to properly explain what frontier duty was actually like, beyond the vague letters he'd sent describing forts and rivers and, presumably, a fair number of owls. It's a strange kind of distance being a soldier out here. Not just the physical distance, though that's real enough. Hundreds of miles between this tower and that little farming settlement in Gaul. It's more that entire lives keep happening back home without him. Harvests come and go. Babies get born. Neighbors' goats keep causing drama, presumably. And Marcus just gets updates on all of it. Second-hand through letters he needs help reading. Months after whatever actually happened. But that's the deal he signed up for. All those years back, standing in front of a recruiting officer who probably barely looked up from his ledger while writing Marcus's name down. 25 years, steady pay, and citizenship waiting at the far end of it. Like a light at the end of a very long, very muddy tunnel. Some nights, that light feels impossibly far away. Tonight, up in this quiet tower with the river murmuring below and the stars slowly filling in above him, it feels a little closer somehow. Not close, exactly, but closer. Marcus shifts his weight, leather creaking softly, and lets his eyes drift back out toward that dark tree line across the river, half watching, half still lost in thought. Somewhere out there, past the forest, past the Empire's edge, his old life keeps quietly moving forward without him. And somewhere ahead, waiting patiently at the end of 25 long years, is whatever life comes next. Those little points of firelight Marcus spotted earlier, off across the river. Let's take a moment and actually talk about who's likely sitting around them. Because here's the thing about that dark tree line the Romans love to stare at nervously. It's not empty, not even close. It's home to a whole patchwork of different Germanic peoples, tribes, and confederations, with their own names, their own leaders, their own complicated relationships with each other. Long before Rome ever showed up trying to draw a line through the middle of everything with a river. Depending on exactly where along the frontier our fort sits, Marcus could be looking out toward the lands of the Chatti. A tough, well-organized group, known for giving Roman commanders more than a few headaches over the years. Or maybe further along, the Marcomanni, who'd eventually become a very big deal indeed, a few generations after our story tonight, stirring up enough trouble to keep a future emperor busy for years. Or perhaps the Suebi, a looser grouping of related peoples who move around a fair bit, depending on the season and whoever they're currently annoyed with. Now here's where it gets interesting, and where Rome's whole us versus barbarians narrative gets a lot messier than the simple version usually told back in the history scrolls. Because the relationship between Rome and these tribes isn't just one long, uninterrupted stretch of conflict. Some seasons, sure, there's fighting, raids, skirmishes, the occasional full-blown military campaign when things get serious. But plenty of other times there's trade. Actual, regular, fairly boring trade. The kind that doesn't make it into dramatic history books because Roman merchant sells wine for amber, everybody's satisfied isn't exactly gripping reading. Roman goods cross that river all the time. Pottery, wine, metalwork, coins. Coming back the other way, amber, furs, cattle, sometimes recruits willing to serve in Rome's own auxiliary units, which is a fun little wrinkle, honestly. Some of the very soldiers standing guard along this frontier, keeping watch against the barbarians, are themselves originally from tribes not all that different from the ones camped out there across the water. Rome's relationship with the Germanic world was never quite as simple as one side glaring at the other from opposite riverbanks forever. That said, let's not pretend it's all friendly trade and mutual respect either, because it definitely isn't. There's real tension here, real history of conflict, and both sides know it. Rome's tried more than once to push its border further into Germanic territory, and more than once it's gotten badly burned trying. Ask any Roman soldier about the Teutoburg forest, a disaster from about a century before our story tonight, where an entire Roman force got wiped out trying to push too deep into these same forests. And you'll get a very serious, very quiet response. It's the kind of history that sticks around in institutional memory, shaping exactly why forts like this one exist along a defined line, instead of Rome just plowing forward into the trees, confidence intact. So that's roughly the uneasy balance Marcus is standing watch over tonight. Not a clean line between civilization and chaos, whatever the more dramatic Roman writers back in the capital might tell you, but something messier and more human than that. Trade one season, tension the next. Neighbors, in a strange way, even if neither side would probably use that word for the other. As for how Rome talks about the people across that river, well, let's just say Roman writers weren't always generous. The word that gets used a lot, back in official reports and popular writing alike, is barbari, barbarians, and it comes loaded with a lot of assumptions, most of them not particularly flattering. Roman writers often painted Germanic tribes as wild, disorganized, driven mostly by instinct and impulse rather than reason or structure. Except, funnily enough, some of those very same Roman writers also occasionally admired qualities they saw in these tribes. Loyalty, physical toughness, a certain uncomplicated honesty that some Roman authors rather awkwardly used as a pointed contrast against what they saw as Rome's own growing softness and excess back in the capital. There's a whole genre of Roman writing basically going, these barbarians live simple lives full of virtue, unlike us sipping wine in our overly comfortable villas. Which is a pretty funny bit of self-criticism, dressed up as cultural commentary if you think about it. Marcus, standing up here with his shield and his tired legs, probably isn't thinking in such grand philosophical terms tonight. To him, the people across that river are mostly just a fact of frontier life, sometimes trading, partners, sometimes a genuine threat. Mostly, on quiet nights like this one, just distant firelight and the occasional worry at the back of his mind. Nothing more dramatic than that. He doesn't know their names mostly, these people camped out there tonight. Doesn't know if it's a peaceful season or a tense one, not with any real certainty. That uncertainty is honestly most of the job. Standing watch not because something is definitely about to happen, but because nobody can be entirely sure that it won't. The fires across the river keep burning steady, small and distant. Whatever life is happening around them tonight, families and arguments and dinners not so different from the one Marcus just had himself, stays exactly as mysterious as it's always been from this side of the water. Marcus watches a moment longer, then shifts his gaze back along the riverbank, settling into the familiar rhythm of watching, waiting, and letting the quiet night carry on around him. Now, right about the middle of the night, something happens. Nothing big, but enough to give tonight's watch a little bump of interest, so let's slow down and walk through it together. It starts with a sound, a snap sharp and sudden coming from somewhere down along the riverbank off to Marcus's left. Not loud exactly, but out here in all that layered quiet of water and wind and creaking wood, even a small sound stands out like someone shouting in a library. Marcus straightens up immediately, hand moving to rest on the hilt of his gladius without even really deciding to do it. Years of training doing the thinking for him before his brain's even fully caught up. Down below and further along the wall, another sentry, a younger guy named Aulus, who's only been posted out here a few months, is clearly having a moment. Marcus can just make him out in the dim torchlight, standing rigid, spear gripped a little too tightly, staring hard into the dark, like he's trying to win a staring contest with the entire forest. "You hear that?" Aulus calls up, voice pitched slightly higher than usual. "Hard not to," Marcus calls back, keeping his own voice low and even, mostly for Aulus's benefit. "New soldiers get jumpy out here. It happens to everyone at first. Best thing an old hand can do is not add to the panic. There's a pause. Then off across the river, a small light flickers into view. Just a single point of orange low to the ground appearing and then steadying among the trees on the far bank. Aulus goes very still. "Is that?" "Probably a fire," Marcus says. "Probably." I said probably. "Give me a second." Marcus watches it for a moment, patient. The way you'd watch a pot to see if it's actually boiling or just looking dramatic. The light doesn't move, doesn't grow, doesn't do anything except sit there, small and steady. Exactly the way a campfire does when nobody's currently panicking about it. "Could be traders," Marcus offers. "Sometimes they camp close to the water this time of year, waiting to cross at first light." "Could be a raiding party," Aulus counters, clearly not fully convinced. Marcus almost laughs but manages to keep it professional. "Could be. Raiding parties usually don't light a fire and just sit next to it, though. Bit of an odd strategy if you're trying to sneak up on anybody." That gets a small reluctant huff out of Aulus, somewhere between a laugh and a nervous exhale. But he's still watching that fire, like it might do something. Another sound then, closer this time. A rustling in the reeds down near the water. Something moving through the brush at a decent pace. Aulus's spear comes up a little higher. Marcus, meanwhile, has already started climbing partway down the ladder, because standing up in a tower squinting isn't actually going to solve anything. Better to go take an actual look. He moves along the wall toward Aulus's position. Boots quiet on the wooden walkway. Senses doing that particular alert but calm thing that comes from having done this 100 times before. As he gets closer, the rustling continues, moving along the reeds, and then, there it is. A shape emerges just at the tree line on this side of the river, low and quick. A deer. A genuinely unimpressed-looking deer, honestly, given the amount of tension it's just caused. It pauses at the edge of the water, looks up toward the wall with mild curiosity, decides none of this is interesting enough to stick around for, and trots off back into the brush without a second glance. There's a beat of silence. "A deer," Aulus says. "A deer," Marcus confirms. "That's twice this week for me." "Welcome to frontier duty," Marcus says, clapping him lightly on the shoulder. "The real enemy out here is mostly wildlife with poor timing." Aulus lets out a proper laugh this time, some of the tension visibly draining out of his shoulders. Across the river, the fire's still burning steady, unbothered by any of this, and honestly, the whole raiding party theory does seem a lot less likely now that everyone's had a second to actually breathe. Marcus glances that way one more time, considering it properly now that the deer drama's settled down. A single, steady fire, low and unmoving. No sounds of movement or voices carrying across the water. Most likely, exactly what he guessed. Travelers or traders. Maybe a small hunting party from one of the villages further in. Camped for the night before. Continuing on wherever they're headed. Come morning. Not every light across that river means trouble. Most of the time, if he's honest, it really is just people going about their evening, same as the soldiers on this side are going about theirs. Still, protocol is protocol, and a good sentry doesn't just shrug something off because it's probably fine. Marcus makes a mental note to mention it to Servius when the watch changes. Nothing urgent, just worth logging in case the pattern continues or changes over the next few nights. "You did fine," Marcus tells Aulus, heading back toward his own tower. Better to call it out and have it be nothing than to stay quiet, and have it be something. Aulus nods, visibly relieved, resettling his spear into a more relaxed grip. Marcus climbs back up to his own platform, Gladius easing back into its resting position at his hip, and lets out a slow breath, the small burst of adrenaline already fading back into the familiar quiet of the night. Across the river, the fire keeps burning, small and steady. Down below, the reeds have gone still again. Just another frontier night, doing exactly what frontier knights usually do, offering up a brief scare and then, just as quickly, taking it right back. With the deer excitement behind him, and the night settling back into its usual quiet rhythm, Marcus's mind drifts a bit again, this time towards something a little more comforting. Tomorrow, once his watch ends and he's grabbed a bit of sleep, he's thinking he might actually make time for the bathhouse, and that gets him thinking about just how strange it is that a bathhouse even exists out here in the first place, because really, if you stop and think about it, it's a bit wild. Out here at the edge of the known world, hundreds of miles from Rome, surrounded by forest that swallows up entire legions if they're not careful, and somehow there's a fully functioning bathhouse, complete with heated floors. Rome really did bring its whole personality out to the frontier, comfort, obsession, and all. The thermi, as it's properly called, works on a system that's honestly kind of impressive even now. Underneath the floor, there's a whole network of channels called a hypocaust, where hot air from a furnace gets pushed through, heating the floor from below and sometimes even running up through hollow spaces in the walls too. So you end up with warm floors, warm rooms, all without a single open flame anywhere near the actual bathing area. It's basically ancient underfloor heating, and if that doesn't impress you a little, I don't know what will. There's usually a few different rooms to move through too. You've got the caldarium, the hot room, where you sweat out a full day's worth of marching in mud. Then the tepidarium, a milder, in-between room to cool down gradually, rather than shocking your whole system. And then, if you're feeling brave, the frigidarium, a proper cold plunge, which honestly sounds like a terrible idea every single time until you actually do it, and then suddenly you understand why soldiers rave about it. Marcus isn't in there tonight, obviously. He's up in a tower, wide awake, hopefully not about to meet any more deer. But the thought of the bathhouse waiting for him tomorrow is doing wonders for his morale. Right about now, somewhere around the least comfortable hour of his watch. Now right next to that image in his head sits another building, one he thinks about a little less fondly. The valetudinarium, the fort's hospital. It's not a place anyone particularly wants to spend time in, obviously, but it's another one of those quietly impressive bits of Roman engineering that people don't always give enough credit to. A proper hospital, out here on the frontier with actual trained medical staff. Men who know how to set broken bones, stitch up wounds, treat fevers and infections with a level of organized care that a lot of ancient armies simply didn't bother with. The building itself is laid out sensibly, too. Small individual rooms rather than one big open ward, which actually helps keep illness from spreading between patients. Something the Romans figured out through practical trial and error long before anybody understood the science behind it. There's decent ventilation, clean water access, even a small kitchen just for preparing food, suited to whatever ailment a soldier's dealing with. Marcus has spent a night or two in there himself, actually. Nothing dramatic, just a bad fever one winter, and a twisted ankle from a training exercise that went slightly wrong the year before that. Both times he came out the other side in better shape than he probably would have back in his little farming village, where medical care mostly meant your mother boiling some herbs and hoping for the best. Rome might drag you far from home and make you stand in cold towers listening for deer, but it does at least try to patch you back up properly when something goes wrong. It's a strange contrast, honestly, standing up here with the wild, untamed forest stretching out endlessly in front of him, knowing that just behind him, back inside those fort walls, there's heated floors and trained physicians and organized medical care. Two completely different worlds, separated by nothing more than a river and a wooden wall, one built on centuries of engineering and structure, the other running on its own, much older, much wilder rhythm. Rome's whole approach to frontier life is a bit like that, really. Plant a small, orderly piece of the empire, right at the edge of chaos, and just maintain it. Keep the baths running, keep the hospital staffed, keep the granaries full, all of it, holding steady against a backdrop of forest and river and uncertainty that doesn't care one bit about hippocausts or trained physicians. Marcus finds a bit of comfort in that thought, actually. Whatever's happening out there across the river tonight, whatever fires are burning in whatever village back behind him, that fort keeps humming along in its same steady, practical way it always does. Baths heating, grain stored, a hospital ready just in case, though hopefully not needed tonight. He shifts his weight against the tower railing, glancing back briefly at the fort's warm, glowing shape behind him, before turning his attention back out toward the dark water and darker trees ahead. A few more hours of watch left before any of that comfort becomes relevant again. For now, it's just him. The quiet and the patient wait for dawn. The night's gone quiet again. Properly quiet. The kind where even the river seems to have settled into a slower rhythm. Marcus's mind, having wandered through home and history and hospitals, finally lands somewhere a bit more personal. He's thinking about that letter, the one he's been meaning to send back to his mother for weeks now and keeps putting off, the way you put off any task that matters more than the easy ones. Tomorrow, he decides, tomorrow, after the bathhouse, before he collapses into sleep, he'll go find one of the fort's scribes and finally get this letter written properly. See, here's the thing about being a soldier who can't write all that well himself. You don't just sit down and pen your own letters home, dramatic and heartfelt, the way you might picture it. You go find someone who can actually do the writing part, and you tell them what to say, and they turn your words into something a bit more presentable. Most forts keep a few scribes around for exactly this reason. Soldiers or clerks with decent handwriting and enough patience to sit and listen to homesick men try to figure out what they actually want to say. Marcus has done this a few times before, and it's always a strange experience, being that honest out loud, with someone else writing it all down. Easier, in a way, to think it than to say it. But he's been rehearsing this one a bit already. Up here in the quiet, the way you do when you've got hours of standing around with nothing else demanding your attention. He'll start simple, probably. Tell his mother he's well. Tell her the posting's decent, the food's food, the other men are good company mostly. He'll ask after the harvest. Ask after his sister and the baby that should be arriving any day now, if it hasn't already. Small stuff, ordinary stuff, the kind of letter that doesn't say much on the surface, but means quite a lot underneath. Mostly just, I'm still here. I still think about you. I haven't forgotten where I came from. He probably won't mention the deer incident earlier tonight, or the wolves. Or really, anything that might make his mother worry more than she probably already does. Sitting back home imagining all sorts of dramatic frontier dangers that mostly, in reality, amount to standing around in the cold being startled by wildlife. Some things are kinder left out of a letter. Thinking about the letter gets him thinking, in that slow, meandering way tired minds do at odd hours, about duty, about what he's actually doing out here. 25 years of his life, standing watch over a river most of the empire, probably never thinks about. Protecting a border that exists more as an idea than a wall. It's a strange kind of purpose, honestly. Not glorious. Not the stuff of grand stories, just steady, patient, repetitive service. One watch after another, one season after another, for reasons bigger than himself and further away than he can properly picture most days. And there's mortality in there too, if he lets his mind go that far, which he tries not to do too often, but the hour and the quiet make it hard to avoid entirely tonight. Frontier duty isn't the safest job in the world, whatever tonight's deer-related excitement might suggest. Things do happen sometimes. Skirmishes, disease, accidents. Not every soldier who starts that 25-year term gets to finish it. Marcus knows a few names that didn't make it this far, tent mates from years back, gone before their time, for reasons ranging from battle wounds to a bad fever that just wouldn't break. It's not something he dwells on constantly. You couldn't function out here if you did. But it sits there, quiet in the back of his mind sometimes, especially on long, still nights like this one. A reminder that the ordinary, boring routine he sometimes complains about is, in its own way, something worth being grateful for. Boring means surviving. Boring means another letter home, another bath tomorrow, another season closer to citizenship and a quiet plot of land somewhere down the line. And that's the strange piece of it, really. This whole frontier routine, gear and porridge and watch duty and creaking towers, isn't glamorous, isn't the stuff future historians are likely to write dramatic accounts about. But there's a comfort in the repetition of it, and a steadiness that Marcus has come to genuinely appreciate over his years of service. Wake up, eat, drill, watch, sleep, repeat. Season after season, the empire holding its shape, not through any one dramatic moment, but through thousands of ordinary nights just like this one. Soldiers, just like Marcus, quietly doing their small part. He glances out at the dark water again, thinking about how he'll phrase things to the scribe tomorrow. Maybe he'll ask about a name for his sister's baby if it's arrived yet. Maybe he'll tell his mother not to worry so much, even though he knows she will anyway, because that's what mothers do, and no letter from a frontier fort is really going to change that. The letter isn't written yet. Won't be for another day at least. But somehow just planning it out up here in the quiet, turning the words over in his mind before he ever says them aloud to a scribe, feels like its own small comfort. A little thread stretching all the way back to that farm in Gaul, to his mother's kitchen, to a life still going on without him. Somewhere in the last stretch of the night, without Marcus really noticing the exact moment it happened, the sky starts to change. It's subtle at first. The deep, heavy black that's been sitting over the forest for hours starts easing, just slightly, into something a shade softer. Not light yet, not really. More like the darkness, deciding to loosen its grip a little, testing the idea of morning before fully committing to it. Marcus notices it, the way you notice most gradual things, not all at once, but suddenly aware that something's different from how it was an hour ago. He glances out toward the tree line, and where before it was just a solid black mass against black sky, now there's the faintest hint of separation. Individual treetops starting to distinguish themselves from the sky behind them. Behind him, back at the fort, things are stirring too. A cock crows loud and completely unbothered by how early it still technically is, somewhere near the fort's small livestock pens. Because that's the thing about keeping chickens around a frontier fort. Practical for eggs, sure, but also just handy as an unofficial alarm clock that nobody has to wind or maintain. A second cock answers the first, not to be outdone, and for a moment the whole fort's got a small chorus going, cheerfully announcing that morning's on its way, whether anyone's ready for it or not. Marcos huffs out a tired laugh at that. 20-something years old, fully armored, guarding the edge of the Roman Empire, and the thing officially declaring the start of a new day is a couple of overly enthusiastic chickens. There's something almost funny about that, if you're tired enough to appreciate it. More sounds start drifting up from the fort now, one by one. Somewhere near the granaries, the low rumble of the bread ovens getting fired up, ready to turn yesterday's stored grain into today's fresh loaves. The smell reaches him a few minutes later, carried faint on the cool morning air. That warm, yeasty scent of bread starting to bake, which might honestly be one of the best smells in the entire world, after a long night of standing around doing not much except worrying about deer. Somewhere further along the wall, Marcus hears voices. Low, groggy, the particular tone of soldiers who've just woken up and aren't thrilled about it yet, getting themselves together for the next watch rotation. A bit of shuffling, some quiet grumbling, someone dropping a piece of equipment with a metallic clatter and immediately getting quietly mocked for it by whoever's standing nearby. The sky keeps lightening, slow and steady, shifting from that deep near black into a soft gray, Then, gradually, hints of pale color starting to bleed in along the horizon where the sun's clearly getting ready to make its appearance. The river below catches the changing light differently now, too. Less like dull silver ribbon and more like it's slowly waking up itself. Small ripples catching the first weak traces of morning color. Marcus rolls his shoulders, feeling the accumulated stiffness of a full night standing in armor. Shield still leaned patiently against the railing beside him. His legs are tired in that specific, familiar way. The ache of standing rather than the ache of marching, which is its own particular flavor of uncomfortable. But there's relief in it too, because tired legs at dawn means the watch is almost over, means warm food and an actual bed are getting closer with every passing minute. Down below, along the fort wall, he can just make out figures moving now, the outgoing and incoming watches, starting their own version of last night's handover, just in reverse. Someone calls out something he can't quite hear from this distance and gets a tired laugh in response. The whole fort's slowly shifting gears, night duty easing into morning routine, the machinery of frontier life, doing what it does every single day, rain or shine, deer or no deer. Titus appears at the base of Marcus's tower a few minutes later, looking about as rumpled and tired as Marcus feels, climbing up part way to relay the message properly. "Relief's coming," Titus calls up. "Couple minutes out." "Finally," Marcus says and means it. "Anything happen?" Marcus considers this. "A deer nearly started a war." Titus laughs, shaking his head, already climbing back down. "Sounds about right." Marcus turns back for one last look out over the water. The forest, now properly visible in the growing light, still and quiet, giving away absolutely nothing about whatever happened out there overnight, if anything happened at all. The fires he'd spotted earlier across the river have gone out, or maybe just faded into the general dawn light. Impossible to spot now either way. The sky keeps brightening, pinks and pale golds, slowly spreading out along the horizon, and somewhere behind him, the fort's fully awake now, full of the ordinary morning noise of soldiers, ovens, chickens, and the general business of a new day getting underway. His watch is nearly done. Just a few more minutes of standing here, taking in this quiet, in-between moment before the world fully wakes up and the routine of another full day begins. Marcus lets himself enjoy it. Just a little longer, before climbing down to meet whoever's coming to take his place. The first hint of morning does not arrive with a grand sunrise. It comes quietly, almost shyly. At first, the sky simply stops being completely black. A thin band of deep blue appears above the eastern trees, so faint that you almost wonder if you imagined it. The stars still shine overhead, but one by one they begin to lose their confidence. The brightest remain for a little longer, while the smaller ones quietly fade away without saying goodbye. After hours of standing on the wooden watchtower, your legs feel heavier than your shield. Your shoulders have grown familiar with the weight of your mail shirt. Even your helmet, which felt perfectly normal yesterday, now seems determined to remind you that iron was never meant to be worn like a fashionable hat. Not that Roman fashion magazines exist, probably for the best. The forest beyond the frontier is changing too. During the night it was a place of mystery, filled with shifting shadows and sounds that made every snapping twig seem far more important than it usually was. Now the trees slowly become ordinary again. There is the old oak near the stream, the cluster of pines that looked suspiciously like marching soldiers in the moonlight, and the crooked stump that managed to frighten at least one new recruit every few weeks. By daylight it is only a stump again. A very successful stump, perhaps, but still only a stump. A cool breeze moves through the tower, carrying the smell of damp earth, river water, and smoke from the fort below. Somewhere inside the walls, the first cooking fires have already been lit. The scent of fresh bread begins to drift upward. It is a wonderful smell, It is also slightly unfair. You have been awake most of the night and your stomach notices the bread long before your eyes notice the sunrise. Behind you, footsteps climb the ladder. Steady, unhurried. The morning relief has arrived. Another legionary appears above the platform, looking surprisingly awake. Perhaps he slept well. Perhaps he simply hides his tiredness better. Either way, he offers a small nod that says everything words do not need to. You return the nod. There is comfort in these quiet routines. No speeches, no dramatic ceremonies, just one tired soldier replacing another. The officer accompanying him asks for the night's password. You answer without hesitation. He gives you the new password that will belong to the next watch. It is a simple exchange, repeated thousands of times across the empire, every single day, along the Rhine, along the Danube, in Britain, in Syria, in North Africa. Most people will never know these passwords. That is exactly how Rome prefers it. You hand over your spear first. The wood is smooth from years of use. Countless hands have carried it before yours, and countless hands will carry it after. Next comes the shield. Its painted surface bears scratches earned from travel, training, rough weather, and the ordinary wear of military life. Surprisingly, few come from glorious battles. Most damage comes from daily work, which is often less exciting, but far more common. Finally, you remove your helmet. Cool morning air touches your hair, and it feels almost luxurious. You had forgotten how light your own head could feel. The new guard settles into position, without fuss. He looks toward the forest. You look toward the fort. Each man now belongs to a different part of the morning. You begin the careful climb down the wooden ladder. Every step reminds you that climbing down is somehow harder than climbing up. Perhaps ladders become longer after midnight. No Roman engineer has yet offered an explanation. Your boots touch the ground at last. The packed earth beneath your feet feels strangely soft after standing for hours on wooden planks. Nearby, other soldiers begin another ordinary day. Stable hands carry buckets of water. A mule complains loudly about something that is almost certainly not important. Somewhere a hammer rings against metal as the blacksmith has already begun his work. The fort is waking, slowly, calmly, as if it has performed this same morning 1,000 times before. Because it has. You walk toward the armory where equipment is checked before being stored. No one rushes. There is little need. The frontier has survived another peaceful night. The clerk makes a quick mark on his wax tablet while you return your assigned gear. Shield, spear, helmet. Everything accounted for. Roman paperwork, it seems, never sleeps. Only the soldiers hope to.